My name's John Christoferis. I'm a senior practice lead on the AWS SaaS Factory team, so a colleague of Oded and Tomasz. And I've been with the team for almost 2.5 years now. I've got about 4 years and a half, give or take a few months at Amazon, having been on the .com side of the business previously. But I have a lot of experience helping customers and partners transition from legacy technology business models over to SaaS models, or even working with startups to help them grow their SaaS business. And I've done this over the course of my career, having worked for a number of SaaS providers. And, today we're here to talk about a sort of famous Amazon innovation mechanism known as working backwards from the customer with SaaS context. And this is a really useful mechanism that we do a lot of teaching about in the course of our SaaS Factory engagements. But, I think the key here is that it can be personalized for the SaaS provider. And so we'll go into a couple of different subsets of topics here about the working backwards process itself and the mechanism that it represents within Amazon. But we're going to start by talking about what it is that SaaS customers actually expect in the first place, just to kind of level set and make sure we begin this dialogue with that in mind. And then, we'll also touch on the artifacts that emerge from a working backwards mechanism once completed. And these are press releases, frequently asked questions documents, or a PRFAQ, in addition to a couple of other inputs to those artifacts. So, Oded, anything else you'd like me to add today, or shall we jump into the material?
You can start right off. Sounds good, John.
Okay, cool. And I'm based in LA, by the way, so it's pretty early here. So if my dogs wake up and start barking or something, I apologize in advance, but we'll deal with that as needed. So in any case, working backwards, really first and foremost is important to understand what SaaS customers expect from their providers, from the folks who are building the solution, delivering this solution to them as a service. And, customers don't want to have to figure out how to put all these pieces together. They're really paying you for jobs to be done. There's a quote from Clayton Christensen. He talks about how customers are now hiring products and services to do a job. That jobs to be done concept is quite famous, and there's a lot that's been written about it. But I think the SaaS customer is unique here, and that, to put it directly, they expect a very simple onboarding process for the most part. They really don't want to be responsible for overly complex integrations or tasks and chores that are really something that should be done on their behalf in most cases. And so, that frictionless onboarding expectation is an important one for the SaaS customer. I think frictionless is the aspiration, but, as frictionless as possible is the reality that we like to encourage. And so, the customers also expect to understand what it is they're getting in exchange for what they're paying you to do. They need this sort of notion of consumption-based pricing. Either they're subscribing to something from you that, perhaps includes a bundle of features and services within a certain tier of, your portfolio. But other times they may also have a more pure pay-as-you-go kind of consumption-based model that really gives them a direct and immediate understanding of what they're consuming in terms of your resources. And so it's important that you attach value to those units of consumption. The unit economics behind that are one thing, your cost models as a provider and how you refine those, but also how you represent the value of what it is your customers are actually consuming. is absolutely key here. And so this exercise we're going to go through today with working backwards, helps kind of align you to these concepts of value, and it helps you understand what it is your customers are expecting, and thus, gives you an opportunity to shape and frame the delivery of that solution to them. And so, rapid and painless innovation is another one that directly aligns with this working backwards exercise, especially for SaaS providers, in that, SaaS customers don't just buy one thing and that's it. The initial transaction is no longer the end of your relationship with them. They want you to continuously deliver new features, new services, new innovation. And it's just what we've all kind of come to expect through, being consumers of software as a service. I think, if you buy something or use something and it doesn't change or evolve to meet additional needs, it's fairly likely that there could be a new competitive solution out there over time that does something, that does new things, and something that solves more of my problems. So this rapid and painless innovation attribute of, the customer expectation space is a really important one, and it often directly impacts the product management functions for SaaS providers. It directly impacts the R&D processes, quite obviously, but it also impacts the ways that even your commercial teams and your sales teams set expectations for customers about what to expect from your business relationship. So, there's all sorts of reasons why these expectations matter. Just like any other cloud adoption, expectation, customers of SaaS solutions don't want to have to deal with the IT management, the overhead of, dedicating skills and labor to managing infrastructure. And that allows them to focus on, driving the outcomes that they care about as your customers. And so making sure that, you have these comprehensive and fundamental understandings, which admittedly are somewhat general, is a good starting point for the discussion regarding working backwards. And I think of this really as a foundational mechanism for SaaS builders. I think that the outcome of all of this is that, if you start early in the process of, building and designing your solution, you're going to be able to build not only the products and features around the customer lifecycle, but also your own business processes. And this is a starting point for planning in all of those areas. So, during the customer acquisition stage, you can have a very direct awareness of what it is you're selling them and why you're selling it to them and to whom you're going to be selling this solution. You're going to help them understand through doing the legwork around the FAQ artifact, what kind of questions they might have as they begin to use the solution for the first time and adopt the solution. You'll also understand what this SaaS product that you're releasing represents with regard to your greater portfolio. Where does this product fit within the overall set of solutions that we're going to be offering these customers throughout their life cycle? And, of course, what's the real value behind all of this that leads a customer to renew with us, which is absolutely key, for all SaaS providers, is to sort of plan for that customer life cycle, not just the initial transaction. The metric you care about most is not necessarily your, year one transaction with a customer. It's perhaps the customer lifetime value, the CLTV. And we'll do sessions, throughout SaaS Lab regarding some common metrics and so on. But we'll also talk later about frameworks like customer journey mapping and persona development so that you can plan for all of these experiences. And this working backwards exercise is really the foundational mechanism for all of those things. It'll help you as you're developing the new customer personas or the personas perhaps of the new buyers within your existing customer base or within the market segments you're trying to reach. It will help you align the expectations those customers have throughout their entire life cycle with you. So, we talk a lot about this as, sort of work that you do early, and it can be quite rigorous and take a good amount of time, but it also ends up saving you a ton of time downstream. So you're not just reacting to these things that happen, throughout the customer's life cycle, but you're planning around it. And in fact, you're building your own organizational capabilities around that expected customer experience and with your products and features. So, we use this process at Amazon for literally every feature we release. There's a legacy here of a decade plus of leveraging this working backwards mechanism to drive innovation. And, we really use it to get clarity, not just to document things that we already know we're going to do, but it's about really understanding the customer needs and making sure that everything you're doing aligns to them directly. SaaS providers spend a lot of money. There's data out there that we reference all the time in our engagements about the multi-billion dollars worth of development costs that go into features and services that customers almost never end up adopting or using. And it's just a really common issue in the space. Providers spend a lot of money building features and services that they think the customer is going to want and use, but again, never end up actually using. So there are really 5 stages to the mechanism of working backwards. I think a lot of times people think of the PRFAQ as working backwards, but the PRFAQ is one of the artifacts that comes out of this process. So, it's important to understand the nature of each of these stages, but, it begins with listening and validating that your understanding of the customer experience is accurate. Then you move on to defining a problem statement and actually designing and inventing your solution. And then you go through the process of refinement, once you've gathered some feedback here. Along the way. And the refinement stage is really where those artifacts begin to take shape, where they start to take the form of a PRFAQ or some other similar mechanism that you might personalize and customize for your own use. And it's thereafter that you're able to test and iterate what it is you built and designed. But this is just a simple representation of the process as a whole, and we're going to get into this with each stage. But one other thing to mention is that there's this concept of the 5 customer questions. There are specific questions that align to each of these stages where they're meant to kind of fuel your process. They're meant to kind of help you put yourself in the customer's shoes, validate that your approach is, the best possible approach for this customer's needs. And, we're going to talk about that as maybe an artifact or a call to action for all of you, when we conclude this is, can you answer these 5 questions for your customers? And can you, try to follow the process that we're outlining here? And of course, we'll share this deck and all sorts of other resources with you after the session. But, again, these artifacts, the press release, first of all, just to share at a high level, what this is. This is, it's kind of a draft press release that represents a few key things. For this particular slide, I'll just leave it at, the press release is meant to represent not only to the market, and eventually you can actually use this as a press release, but, until that launch happens for you, this is really your internal guiding light when it comes to representing what it is you're building and why you're building it to both your employees and perhaps your investors along the way. And so this press release document is really meant to help fuel autonomous decision making. And you think about SaaS customers expecting you to, deliver innovation with agility to them and move quickly. Well, you have to have tools to allow you to move quickly as an organization. And so, think about this through the eyes of the SaaS product manager who might, own a document like this or at least play a substantial role in collaborating with others in a document like this. This allows them, as they're going through the feature design and service design process, to perhaps help hone in on where it is they're going to make these investments and why they're going to do it. There's a quote from a hypothetical customer in here. There's a quote from an executive leader with your business that talks about the importance of this solution to the market segments you're pursuing, to the industry that you're reaching here. And there's a whole templatized framework that you can follow as you're developing your own PR FAQ model. But again, the key principles here with the press release are that it allows you to make decisions faster internally. You do the legwork up front of developing the PR, and you post it somewhere internally where your teams can refer to it when they're making decisions. Do I want to experiment? Even your technical teams will use this in that, should we be experimenting on some particular feature? Should we be looking in a certain direction as we're setting our teams into action here and giving them some guidance in terms of what it is they're building? Well, we use the PRFAQ to do that. And so, if decisions are made that reflect what's represented in the PRFAQ, then that's okay. They're not always the right decisions, but if they're aligned to what we're trying to accomplish, it can be quite useful to have that sort of, underlying structure that empowers your teams. So, these go through iterations, I'll mention. Sometimes we go through literally dozens of iterations as you're doing this, and as you begin, to get closer and closer to the actual launch of your product, you start to, refine this document so it can potentially be used in an actual, press release scenario. But, it's all about making sure you're consistent across your organization with how you're approaching the development of this solution. What are we trying to do for this customer? And again, the artifacts, these are the outputs of this process we're going to go through, but the FAQs, I'll keep this one really simple. We all know what FAQs are, but these are unique because they're not only the questions that you anticipate your customer having, they're the questions you anticipate your employees having. There's the two-sided approach to this, where it's not only an acknowledgement of what you expect the customer to wonder about using your product or buying it, but also how is this going to change things for your staff, and what are their new responsibilities going to look like? What other questions are they going to have about perhaps the fundamental aspects of SaaS, or in a startup environment, it could be what's going to come next. What are the next sort of features and services we're going to release? So these are the key outcomes from this exercise, and the 5 customer questions are inputs to this, to all of this. And you kind of start with those 5 customer questions that we'll go through in this process. But the visuals this could be as simple as a napkin diagram. It's just helpful, given that people learn differently, to have some sort of sketch or representation of what it is you're building. And we do it in different ways, for our different products and services. But the idea here is, creating visual representations of perhaps the customer's journey is throughout their life cycle, or perhaps the actual features and services that you're trying to build here is going to be important. But let's talk about the process, and thinking about stage 1, listen. I mean, it's quite obvious to listen to your customers before you're going to go build and invest in doing things. But you'd be surprised at how many of the companies we work with in the SaaS Factory program build products and features, or at least before they encounter our recommendations, they're building products and features that were decided upon based on the legacy experience they have as either a subject matter expert in the space, or as a previous customer in the space themselves, or what they've learned from their existing customer base that might be using some sort of legacy solution. All of those things are quite valid, but thinking about the SaaS customer expectation, you start to prioritize ensuring that you have a clear understanding of who it is you're trying to reach as a growth model for your business. What is our total addressable market, to put it simply, simply, but then what are the key segments within that market? How big are they? What insights do we actually have, not only about the customers, but the vertical that they're in? Are there SaaS adoption trends that we can look at from benchmarking data from companies like IDC or the other providers of this info like Gartner? But where are we getting insights about these customers? That's an important aspect here. So to work backwards from the customer, you really have to get to know them, and understanding what it is you actually know about them versus where some of your biases from previous experience might be playing a role becomes really key here. So these actions that you're going to be taking in the listen stage include talking directly to your customers, seeking out feedback and anecdotes from others within the market segments that you may not be reaching today with existing customers, making sure that you're analyzing data from reputable sources, and also working with design teams and research and development teams to gather insights about these customers. And the purpose here is just to truly understand the customers within those market segments you're trying to reach, get to know their needs and their unique experiences. So prioritizing what data we're going to assess in this process. What kind of feedback do we need to gather? Who do we need to talk to here? Who are the other stakeholders? Are there partners involved in this? And being as thorough as possible to do that. I think that's a really important step in the research and development process. Conducting focus groups maybe or surveys, but without that validation of your idea, it can lead to poor investments in terms of the decisions you're making with respect to the features and services you're going to build. So, leverage your UX teams, leverage usability studies, get as much information and insight as you can about these customers, and really over-index here with the first customer question. And the sort of beginning of the process here requires that. What is the customer problem or opportunity? That's the second stage here, and the outcome here is for you to define this very clearly, without a lot of jargon, without a lot of complexity. You want a clear, concise problem statement here. You're synthesizing your customer data that you gathered in the previous stage, and you're creating a problem statement or an opportunity statement that's going to help you prioritize the problem you're going to focus on here. And this, for SaaS providers, also begins to feed into this concept of value recognition. You need to build features and services that will deliver value to your customers. And often there are opportunities now for you to measure their interaction with the product and how they adopt it. So this starts to shape your own operational process here. Once you get clear on the problem that your solution's trying to solve, sometimes you can, when it's out there in the market, you can actually assess, just through the product adoption metrics you can, look at, you can tell whether or not the customer is realizing, the solutions to these problems. But really, sometimes you're going to need to pull that data in through having conversations with customers. You won't be able to necessarily understand through product adoption alone whether or not you're solving their problems. And that's the key is, are you building your solution with this premise of, driving outcomes for your customers? Those are the themes that sort of emerge from this kind of discussion. And it's why this question's so important. So, here in stage 2, you're looking back at the listen stage and you're saying, what are the top trends that we noticed from all of that customer feedback and data and conversation? And, you're trying to come up with an answer to the second half of this sentence, which would be customers need a way to do X. And that's really the way to think about this in terms of the outcome. And keep it simple, keep it direct, but again, you can see how this will set you up for defining in a more measurable sense downstream what value represents to these customers. And the third stage is very important as well. What's the right solution to address the customer need versus other alternatives, right? What are the activities you're going to plan to generate ideas and solutions with others? So you're going through the invent stage. What kind of innovation mechanisms are we going to leverage here? And are there frameworks we can follow, and who should be included in those events that we're setting up here to make sure that the things that are happening in stage 1 and 2 are being referred to directly. So are you going to do some design ideation and go through the process of getting a team together and really coming up with direct solutions to those problems that have been defined? And so here it's important really in the invent stage that you're considering multiple alternatives. You're really challenging yourself to think outside the expectations you may have had entering into this exercise, but making sure that you are categorizing the possible solutions by things like cost or impact or time and effort can be useful. So we'd recommend doing that as well here in the third stage, where you want to make sure that you're looking at these through different frameworks. And so cost, the outcomes that each of these potential solutions will drive, and or the scope and complexity of effort that's going to be required to put these out there into the market. And I think it's important here that you're not limiting the scope of this brainstorming and ideation session when you're going through this because you have a bias towards things you've already built or things you already want to build. This is kind of where the real process starts to help you with an assessment of those ideas. This is where you're kind of beginning to really get a sense for whether or not this is the only thing you should build, or should we be doing more. And so ideation and design can happen here in this stage and potentially give you an opportunity to pivot away from some of what you've been doing previously. But finally, or fourth here out of 5 is the refine stage. This is really, by the way, where those artifacts start to emerge. This is where you start to craft your vision for this solution. You're challenged to describe the end-to-end customer experience as well as the most important benefit that goes along with it. So here is where you're writing the working backwards documents, the PRFAQ, your diagrams. You're beginning to approach the point where you're able to have the answers to these questions and thus sort of put this all into motion. And so here the key is that you're really painting a picture of that end-to-end customer experience and how are they going to interact with your solution. And here also, I think the key aspect is the most important benefit. It's not just what is the list of benefits, but it's the fact that we need to decide what the single most important benefit is. And that's a real challenge. I know a lot of these questions on the surface seem very simple, but when you do this as a SaaS provider, it really forces you to get clear about the outcome that you're ultimately trying to drive. Sometimes it's, hey, they're going to make money off of this solution. There's a big ROI attached to it. But in other spaces, it's a different set of outcomes, and some of those inputs to those outcomes can be measured. Others cannot. So this is where you start to get a sense for, hey, here's the features and tools and such that I can introduce within the product itself, but there are other things that need to happen in order for the customer to achieve this benefit. So there are services I need to develop and deliver. There might be customer success functions that need to happen in order to enable the customer to realize these benefits. And it's very easy for SaaS builders, especially startups, to get so excited about the build aspects and the design aspects that they sort of miss the fact that if we don't design this product to include some, services that help address these more subjective things that the product itself cannot do or cannot measure, then we're having to kind of react downstream once the product's in the market, and we're realizing that, hey, customers won't realize the full value of this solution without those kind of add-ons. And so, it's again part of the foundational process here. So finally, test and iterate. thinking about, this as you're going through this process. How are we going to define and measure the success of this, what it is we're trying to accomplish? I mean, here you're really identifying the customer behaviors that you want to test for. You've gathered all this customer feedback through focus groups, but usability studies are really important here, and making sure that you've got enough of this feedback that's going to help you truly improve on and deliver your solution to these customers. And you think about the concepts that have been mentioned previously in the SaaS, the journey to SaaS, where you've got this sort of minimum viable service sort of stage, or the MVP, if you want to call it an MVP. I think the idea is during the MVP stage in a SaaS environment, you're going to be testing more than whether or not the buttons are working, right? You're not just looking at how the consumer interacts with the product, but you're looking at the costs that you incur in serving those customers. You're looking at the operational costs that you're incurring in terms of having people interact with these customers, if there's a customer success function involved in what you're doing. And I think that the key here to really mention is that planning this stuff in advance helps you immensely downstream as you're going through the product release cycle and you're getting into that stage. You, again, have some guiding principles that are clear for you in this PRFAQ framework that are really going to enable you to move quickly into things like planning your MVP or your minimum viable service. So that's, again, just trying to align with the journey. So in summary, with regard to the press release aspect, the key here is that you're focusing on the SaaS specific customer need. If you've been, in this industry vertical for a while, or you're, an expert, or you have existing customers that are in this space doing something already, make sure that you're doing all of this with great granularity and specificity on who the SaaS customer is. Getting a quote into the PRFAQ from a hypothetical or even a prospective real customer is absolutely key to this, because it's that customer point of view that really represents the outcome that you're trying to help them achieve. And so I think this hypothetical customer statement about what this product has done for them is going to be a key element of the PRFAQ. Don't be so hung up on, the sort of SaaS customer that you miss the opportunity within the wider market segment to reach more SaaS customers. When you're saying who is the customer here, you're really in the first customer question we reviewed, you're really assessing your total addressable market. You're looking at the segments that make that market up, and that's going to have a big impact on the investments that you make in infrastructure and in the choices that you make. You really don't want to take this approach, if you can avoid it, of, hey, I'm going to build a solution that meets the needs of our first couple of customers because they're going to be large customers and we'll be very happy if we acquire them. But you need to make sure you're making investments that scale into that total addressable market you're trying to reach. And so even a simple document like this can help you define that and can help, sort of clarify for finance teams or anyone within your organization why it is you're doing this. And so, think big along the way. Try to avoid corporate jargon in the document. Just keep it simple and direct. We'll share a template with you after the session where you can see, a step-by-step guide to writing a PRFAQ. There's a really structured approach to this, and I think, again, the first version that you're building, don't over-index on getting it perfect. Try to get it done with some structure behind it that makes clear the market you're trying to reach, the statement that's a hypothetical one from a future customer, and one of your own executives talking about what it is you're doing and what it represents to the market as a whole. But we'll share this template and encourage you all to follow up here and start this process by answering those 5 customer questions. I want to spend just a moment here around the frequently asked questions aspect here, and just to kind of clarify some of the things I said earlier. And I think that the FAQ is not just, it's not just your sort of typical product management exercise where we want to list a whole bunch of the questions we know the customer's going to have. It's about anticipating questions they're going to have throughout their entire life cycle, right? And so you can take this kind of work and leverage it. If you do the FAQ right here, that becomes a foundational piece for your customer journey mapping mechanism, which it can follow this exercise, right? By completing this process of working backwards from the customer, you've now got a resource you can use to begin mapping their journey, designing the features and services that they're going to be interacting with throughout that life cycle as a customer, and anticipating their questions throughout that life cycle is going to be really important, because again, you think about that frictionless onboarding expectation that SaaS customers have. If I know they're going to ask a question, why do I need a person there to answer it for them when I can simply educate them through some sort of collateral or some sort of interaction with the product itself? But showing, a comprehensive understanding of where you expect your customer to have questions gives you a chance to remove that friction from their experience. How can I make this a more intuitive solution from a product design and development point of view? And that's really what you're trying to do across the board. So that's one thing. But again, in startups, probable questions from employees often relate to, what's coming next? Where are we going from here? What is this product going to do for the market segments? Of course, they can see that in the PR, the press release side of this. But, the questions they may have often relate to, what if this doesn't work, right? And this is the other thing that, a lot of the PR FAQs we write end up getting new products and services off the ground, but a lot of them don't make it to market, right? Like a lot of them don't necessarily clear the MVS stage if we're talking about SaaS, or the minimum lovable most lovable product stage as we talk about our own MVP framework at AWS. But the idea here is that understanding that sometimes you're not right about the premise, and you're not answering these questions as accurately as you could. And that's why we talk about these being kind of organic, living, breathing documents that all the way up until the launch of the solution should have owners of iteration. You should be inspecting these consistently, because this is what the source of truth within your organization is going to be in terms of decision making and the information that fuels decision making. So, again, spending this time early, save in the research and development process if possible. It's never really too late to do this, by the way, but doing this early will help you downstream to save an immense amount of time, and it will allow you to plan for a lot of the encounters you're going to have with your customers, and a lot of the challenges you might encounter with your own employees when things don't necessarily go to plan. So anticipating their questions, making sure that you've got the structured approach in place there, where you've given thought to the customer experience. Sometimes, by the way, it's like this is proof that you're actually giving thought to their experience over the course of their life cycle. And a lot of companies, in their eagerness to release new products and features, tend to miss that. They tend to either build something that they can sell once to a few really important customers and just keep moving on. But if you really dedicate time and energy to putting yourself in their shoes, it's going to set you up for long-term success and greater adoption of your products and services. So, calls to action for you all here. I think this can fuel some of your credits you're getting for participation and delivering results here. If you'd like to share this with me or Oded or Tomas, either any of us, in fact, can help you with this sort of assessment of what it is you're documenting here. If you can work through the 5 customer questions just in a simple format as we've listed them right here, I think that's a great next step. And if you can get that clarity around these answers that sort of meets the bar for SaaS providers, meaning, they're data driven, we've got a real clear definition of value, some sort of representation of how we're going to measure that value as providers of the solution, and potentially some sort of framework of the experience, whether that's your image, your visual, or it's just a description of the end-to-end customer experience. I think we'd be happy to help you and sort of turn eventually those answers to the 5 customer questions into a PRFAQ. This is a more time-consuming call to action here, right? This one is potentially not going to happen overnight, and this is something where after you've answered those 5 customer questions, you can build on that to really put them into that PRFAQ framework and post them somewhere internally and allow your teams to reference this as a guiding light as they sort of navigate their journey to building and releasing this solution on AWS. So that was a lot. You all are very polite listening to me talk for 45 minutes straight, and I'll be quiet now and happily take any questions that folks might have.